The Torment in the Woods. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of decaying leaves and the faint aroma of wood smoke. I took a deep breath, savoring the familiar smells of the forest that had been my sanctuary for as long as I could remember. Hiking always helped clear my mind, allowing me to escape the stresses of everyday life, if only for a few hours. As I ventured deeper into the wooded trail, the sounds of civilization faded, replaced by the gentle rustling of branches and the occasional call of a bird. It was peaceful, serene, or so I thought. I had hiked this particular route countless times before, but something felt off. A subtle unease crept over me, a nagging sense that I was being watched, stalked by some unseen presence. At first, I chalked it up to an overactive imagination, fueled by one too many late-night horror movies. But as the minutes ticked by, the feeling intensified, sending prickles of dread coursing down my spine. The forest seemed to close in around me, the once welcoming trees taking on a more sinister aspect, their gnarled branches twisting into ominous shapes that danced at the periphery of my vision. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the familiar comfort of the main trail, but the path seemed to stretch on endlessly, the distance distorted as if by some unseen force. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, carried on the wind, its source indiscernible. At first, I dismissed it as the rustling of leaves or the call of some distant animal. But then it came again, louder this time, a garbled utterance that sent icy tendrils of fear slithering through my veins. I stopped in my tracks, straining to catch the sound, my heart pounding in my ears. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" Silence answered, save for the gentle soughing of the breeze through the trees. Shaking my head, I pressed on, convincing myself that it was merely a trick of the mind, a phantom conjured by my own overactive imagination. But the further I ventured, the more unsettling the forest became. Shadows seemed to twist and undulate, taking on vaguely humanoid shapes that danced just beyond my field of vision. The whispers grew more frequent, more insistent, their garbled utterances weaving into a discordant chorus of unintelligible murmurings. I broke into a jog, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere that had enveloped the woods. But no matter how fast I ran, the path seemed to stretch on endlessly, the trees closing in around me, like the bars of some invisible cage. Panic gripped me, and I found myself running blindly, heedless of the direction, driven only by the primal urge to flee. That's when I saw it, a figure, standing motionless amid the trees, its form obscured by the dappled shadows. I skidded to a halt, my breath catching in my throat as I stared at the apparition. "Hello," I called out again, my voice barely more than a tremulous whisper. The figure remained silent, unmoving, almost statuesque in its stillness. Gathering my courage, I took a tentative step forward, squinting to make out its features. That's when it moved, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette on twisted strings. I froze, rooted to the spot by a paralyzing terror that gripped my very soul. As the figure drew nearer, its features became clearer, and what I saw chilled me to the core. It was a woman, or at least it had once been. Her face was twisted into a rictus of agony, eyes wide and bulging, mouth agape in a silent scream. Her skin was pallid and sallow, stretched taut over a skeletal frame that seemed almost desiccated. But it was her movements that truly unnerved me. They were inhuman, her limbs contorting and bending in ways that defied the natural laws of anatomy. I wanted to run, to flee from this unholy apparition, but I found myself rooted to the spot, transfixed by a combination of primal terror and morbid fascination. As the creature drew closer, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening cacophony, assaulting my ears with a barrage of unintelligible utterances that seemed to claw at the very edges of my sanity. I clapped my hands over my ears, desperate to block out the maddening chorus, but it was no use. The whispers seemed to emanate from within my own mind, burrowing deep into the recesses of my psyche. The creature was upon me now, its twisted visage mere inches from my own. I could smell the fetid stench of decay, overwhelming and nauseating, and see the minute details of its twisted countenance, the cracked, peeling skin, the sunken eyes that burned with an unholy light, the jagged teeth that gnashed and clacked in a parody of human speech. And then it reached out towards me, its skeletal fingers stretching forth, grasping, clawing at the air as if seeking purchase on my very soul. I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but no sound would come. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, helpless before this entity that had crawled forth from the darkest recesses of the unknown. As its icy touch brushed against my skin, I felt a chill so profound, so utterly antithetical to the warmth of life, that it seemed to leach the very essence of my being. Images flickered before my eyes, visions of realms beyond comprehension, populated by entities so nightmarish, so utterly alien, that to gaze upon them was to risk shattering one's sanity. I saw worlds of endless torment, where souls were flayed and torn asunder, their anguished screams echoing through eternity. I witnessed horrors that defied description, atrocities so profound that the mere glimpse of them left me trembling and hollow, a husk drained of all hope and joy. And through it all, the whispers persisted, a maddening litany of gibberish that wormed its way into the deepest recesses of my mind, burrowing like parasitic tendrils that threatened to consume my very essence. I don't know how long I endured this torment, this unending assault on my senses and sanity. Time seemed to stretch into an eternity of suffering, each moment an agonizing epic of terror. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the creature recoiled, its twisted form dissipating, like smoke on the wind, the whispers fading into silence. I collapsed to the forest floor, trembling and drenched in a cold sweat, my mind reeling from the ordeal. As I lay there, gasping for breath, I became aware of the sound of footsteps approaching, heavy, deliberate footfalls that seemed to echo through the stillness of the woods. Fear gripped me once more, and I scrambled to my feet, stumbling blindly through the undergrowth, desperate to escape whatever fresh torment awaited me. But no matter how far I ran, the footsteps persisted, dogging my every step, drawing inexorably nearer. Finally, exhausted and disoriented, I stumbled into a small clearing, the sparse rays of the setting sun filtering through the canopy of trees. As I turned to continue my flight, I found myself face to face with the source of the footsteps. It was a man, or at least it appeared to be a man, but his features were twisted and distorted as if viewed through a funhouse mirror. His eyes were sunken and hollow, his skin stretched taut over a skeletal frame that seemed almost emaciated. But it was his mouth that truly unnerved me. It was impossibly wide, stretching from ear to ear in a rictus grin that exposed row upon row of jagged, needle-like teeth. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest as the creature advanced, its movements fluid and predatory. What are you?" I managed to croak, my voice trembling with terror. The creature paused, cocking its head to the side as if considering my question. Then it spoke, or at least I think it did. The sound that emanated from that twisted maw defied description, a guttural, inhuman vibration that seemed to reverberate through my very bones, filling me with a primal dread, unlike anything I had ever experienced. As the creature drew nearer, I could make out the words, or what passed for words, in that unholy tongue. "We are the harbingers," it rasped, its voice like the grating of rusted metal. "The heralds of the end times, the bringers of oblivion." I shook my head, unable to comprehend the words, my mind reeling from the sheer horror of the situation. What do you want?" I whispered, my throat constricted with fear. The creature's twisted grin seemed to widen, its jagged teeth glinting in the fading light. "Your suffering," it hissed, its words dripping with malevolence. "Your anguish is our sustenance, your torment, our lifeblood." As if on cue, the whispers began anew, a cacophony of garbled utterances that seemed to emanate from the very trees themselves, surrounding me, enveloping me in a maelstrom of madness. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it was no use. The whispers wormed their way into my mind, burrowing deep, planting seeds of doubt and fear that blossomed into full-blown paranoia. The creature advanced, its twisted form looming over me, casting a long, distorted shadow that seemed to swallow me whole. I wanted to run, to flee this nightmare made manifest, but my legs refused to obey, rooted to the spot by a paralytic terror that gripped my very soul. As the creature reached out towards me, its skeletal fingers brushing against my skin, I braced myself for the onslaught of torment that was sure to follow. But instead of the expected onslaught of horrific visions, something different happened. The world seemed to shift, the colors bleeding and blending into a kaleidoscope of nightmarish hues. The trees twisted and contorted, their branches elongating and coiling like serpents, reaching out to ensnare me in their sinuous embrace. The ground beneath my feet, became soft and yielding like quicksand, threatening to swallow me whole. And through it all, the whispers persisted, a maddening chorus that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of reality itself. I struggled, fought against the shifting landscape, desperate to escape this living nightmare. But the more I resisted, the deeper I sank, the world around me warping and twisting into ever more horrific configurations. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of torment, the shifting ceased, and I found myself in a realm so alien, so utterly antithetical to the world I knew that it defied description. The sky burned with sickly hues of violet and crimson, the ground beneath my feet, a roiling sea, a viscous, tar-like ooze that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own. Twisted spires of bone and flesh jutted from the ooze, stretching towards the blazing heavens like the grasping claws of some long-dead leviathan. And all around me, the whispers swirled and eddied, a constant susurrus of madness that threatened to overwhelm my senses. I turned, seeking an escape, but there was none to be found, only an endless expanse of this nightmarish realm stretching into infinity. That's when I saw them, figures, twisted and distorted, shambling through the ooze, their forms shifting and undulating like grotesque, liquid sculptures. As they drew nearer, I could make out their features, or what passed for features on these unholy aberrations. Their faces were twisted into masks of agony, mouths agape, and silent screams, eyes bulging with unspeakable torment. And yet, despite their horrific appearance, there was a hunger in their movements, a predatory intent that chilled me to the core. They shambled closer, their twisted limbs reaching out, grasping, clawing at the air, as if seeking to rend the very fabric of reality itself. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind teetering on the edge of madness. That's when I felt it, a presence, looming and malevolent, a force so vast and incomprehensible that to even glimpse it was to risk shattering one's sanity. I turned, and there it was, a being so monstrously vast, so utterly alien, that to describe it would be to diminish its true horror. It towered over me, its form shifting and undulating like a living mountain of flesh and bone, its countless eyes burning with an unholy radiance that seemed to scorch the very air. And from its myriad mouths, a chorus of whispers poured forth, a discordant symphony of madness that threatened to drown out all reason, all sanity. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the sheer enormity of this nightmarish entity, my mind teetering on the brink of oblivion. And as the whispers crescendoed, reaching a fever pitch of unintelligible utterances, I felt something within me shift. It was as if a door had been opened, a portal into realms beyond comprehension, and through that aperture, I glimpsed something. A presence, vast and ineffable, a force so utterly transcendent that to even contemplate its existence was to risk unraveling the very fabric of reality. And in that moment, I understood. This realm, this nightmarish expanse, was but a mere shadow, a pale reflection of a reality so vast, so incomprehensibly alien that to gaze upon it was to risk losing one's very sanity. The whispers swirled around me, seeming to coalesce into words, or at least what passed for words, in this unholy tongue. "You have glimpsed the truth," they hissed, their collective voice reverberating through the very core of my being. "You have peered beyond the veil, and now you must choose, embrace the madness, or be consumed by it." I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but no sound would come. I was trapped, helpless, at the mercy of forces beyond comprehension. And then, just as I thought, the madness would consume me, something shifted. The world around me seemed to warp and bend, the colors bleeding and blending into a miasma of nightmarish hues. And through it all, the whispers persisted, a maddening chorus that threatened to drown out all reason, all sanity. I struggled, fought against the shifting landscape, desperate to escape this waking nightmare. But the more I resisted, the deeper I sank, the world around me warping and twisting into ever more horrific configurations. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shifting ceased, and I found myself back in the familiar surroundings of the forest, the setting sun casting long shadows across the leaf-strewn ground. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, my mind reeling from the ordeal. Had it all been a hallucination, a vivid nightmare conjured by some unknown force? Or had I truly glimpsed realms beyond comprehension, caught a fleeting glimpse of a reality so vast, so utterly alien, that to gaze upon it was to risk shattering one's sanity? To this day, I cannot say for certain. All I know is that the memory of that experience still haunts me, the whispers still echoing in the darkest recesses of my mind. And in the dead of night, when the world lies silent, I can't help but wonder, was it all a twisted delusion? Or did I truly brush against the veil, separating our world from realms beyond comprehension? The uncertainty, the lingering dread, is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of all. For how can one find solace when the very foundations of reality have been called into question? How can one sleep soundly, knowing that just beyond the veil, nightmares walk among us, waiting for the chance to drag us screaming into the abyss? I don't have the answers. All I have is the memory of that fateful day in the woods and the knowledge that somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the unknown, horrors lurk, horrors so profound, so utterly incomprehensible that to even glimpse them is to risk losing one's sanity. And the whispers never cease, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the veil, waiting to consume all that we know and hold dear.